Sometimes it's fun to do something entirely new, something different than anything you've ever done before. And that is true for fishing as well. Sometimes it's fun to fish in a place very different than anywhere you've fished before. A new place with different conditions and new species, a new challenge. Recently, I got such an opportunity. I got an opportunity to fish the Oceanic Piers in Southern California, and specifically the Balboa, Newport Beach, Ventura, and Malibu Oceanic Piers. Now, before this trip, I'd never seen the Pacific Ocean before and obviously hadn't fished it, so this was all very new to me. I had no guide and no real opportunity to do research about proper bait or lures or techniques, so I had no idea really what I was doing, and I was just winging it, fishing when I could and trying to catch whatever I could. My goals, if you can call them that, were very modest. I knew that Pacific mackerel were caught off these piers, and I've caught a lot of Atlantic mackerel in the Northeast, which is where I typically fish the ocean. So I brought my arsenal of jigs and lures for Atlantic mackerel with the goal of trying to catch just one Pacific mackerel. I also had fish bites of various flavors. And of course, nothing worked because I didn't know what I was doing. And apparently what works almost every time for Atlantic mackerel in the Northeast does not work at all for Pacific mackerel in California. It wasn't the fish or the conditions. Others around me caught fish. I saw folks catch croaker, sand perch, bonita, leopard sharks, Pacific mackerel, and more. I fished into the night, but ultimately I struck out on Balboa Pier. No fish. I don't think I was particularly close to catching anything. Next up was Newport Beach Pier. Having struck out at the first pier on the itinerary, the pressure was starting to build, and the anxiety. I seemed to be a long way away from understanding how to catch fish, and now I was having doubts as to whether I could even catch one fish on this trip. The doubts were valid. I cycled through my lures but couldn't buy a bite. Honestly, I didn't see much activity on Newport Beach Pier. I was there in the middle of the day, which presumably was not an ideal time for fishing. There were schools of jack smelt circling the pier, but they were tiny and my lures were too big to catch them. I didn't see much else. While I enjoyed the bluish-green waters of the Pacific Ocean, I didn't catch fish. After a few hours, it was time to pack up, get in the car, and keep moving. We got to Ventura Pier in the evening the next day. The wind was gusting and the conditions were tough. I was still determined to fish. My anxiety continued to rise. 2 piers down already and I was yet to catch anything. The wind was now gusting at 20 knots. Casting accuracy was not possible. Even my heaviest metal jigs were being blown around in the wind. And because of the wind, I ended up donating 2 of those metal jigs to the bottom. At one point, I had a Pacific mackerel on the hook briefly. I even got it to the surface and saw it. But then I misplayed it and it spit the hook before I could get it up onto the pier. So it goes with fishing sometimes. Roughly 2 hours later, the sun went down and it was time to leave. 3 piers down now. and still no fish. I only had one more chance, the Malibu pier. I arrived at Malibu Pier after a long day, right as the sun was setting, and I knew in the back of my mind that this was it. This was my last chance to catch a fish in Southern California, and that time was fleeting. But I tried not to think about failure as I went to work. Fishing with a little sabiki, shrimp on it. I was determined to stay and keep fishing until I caught a fish. Just one fish. I only needed one fish. But time passed, the minutes ticked by, nothing. And then suddenly there it was. The tug on the line, the bite I'd been looking for, I had a fish on the line, and for a brief moment, I was ecstatic. I had caught a sand perch. Not a big one, it was pretty small actually. Not a great catch by any means or any standards, but I had caught something. And at this point, that was all that mattered. Sometimes it only takes one fish to turn a fishing trip into a success.